She was left alone at the table, humiliated, fighting back tears. Just when she thought the night couldn't get worse, a single dad and his little girl stood up and changed her life forever. Where are you watching from? Share it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories. The Kindling Cafe in Portland glowed with warm amber light, the kind that made every polished glass shimmer and every whispered laugh carry just a little further than it should. Lauren Bennett sat at a corner table, her posture graceful, her blue evening dress flowing like water under the soft lamps. She checked her phone again, the faint screen glow catching the anxious curve of her lips. No message, no call, just silence. Marcus was supposed to be here. 2 months of careful dinners, polite conversations, the promise of something steady after years of men who only wanted to know her resume or her bank balance. Tonight was meant to be different, but his chair across from her remained painfully empty, the untouched wine glass catching light like a cruel spotlight on her disappointment. Lauren straightened her back, forcing a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She had been holding it together for 45 long minutes, pretending to scroll, pretending to wait with patience. But the cafe had its own rhythm, couples leaning close across tables, laughter clinking against crystal, servers moving with practiced ease. Around her, those glances, quick, cutting, a young woman whispering behind her hand, an older man shaking his head with pity, the kind that burns more than cruelty. She tried to convince herself he might be stuck in traffic, that maybe he'd appear with an apology and flowers. But deep down, she knew he wasn't coming, and she was left to carry the weight of his absence in a room that seemed to notice every second of it. The server approached quietly, his hands folded, his tone gentle yet unavoidably loud in the hush that surrounded her. "Excuse me, miss, it's been nearly an hour. Should we cancel the other setting?" The words fell like stones into still water, and the ripples spread instantly. Heads turned, forks paused midair. A couple at the next table exchanged a look of second-hand embarrassment. Lauren's cheeks burned. The heat rose fast, betraying the calm expression she fought to hold. She pressed her palms flat against the linen, nodded once, and found her voice only enough to whisper, "Yes, cancel it." The server gave a small nod of understanding, but the damage was done. The sound of her own consent to his absence was louder than the cafe's music, louder than the laughter around her. She kept her chin lifted, refusing to let tears fall. Yet the sting in her eyes betrayed her heart. In that moment, surrounded by strangers and their pity, Lauren Bennett felt smaller than she had in years. A woman who built her life on strength and composure now sat alone at a table set for two, her dignity balancing on the edge of breaking. And still, somewhere deep inside, she whispered to herself that the night could not possibly get worse. What she didn't know was that fate had already begun to shift, and her worst evening was about to open the door to something she never expected. From just a few tables away, Ethan Walker had been watching the scene unfold without meaning to. He wasn't the kind of man who enjoyed intruding on other people's lives, but sometimes life placed you in the right seat at the right time. He had chosen tonight carefully. Weeks of saving his paycheck from the school kitchen, putting aside a few dollars here and there just so he could treat his daughter to something more than takeout. The Kindling Cafe wasn't where single dads usually brought their kids, but Moya had been asking for a grown-up dinner, and he couldn't say no to the way her eyes lit up at the idea. Mia sat across from him, legs too short to touch the floor, swinging lightly as she dipped a chicken finger into a small ramekin of sauce. She was busy explaining the difference between the dragon she had drawn last week and the new one she'd started, her little hands moving in wide arcs to show wings and fire. Ethan smiled, nodding along, soaking in the sound of her voice. It was a rare thing a night like this, a night without dishes stacked in the sink, without the loneliness that still crept in when the apartment grew quiet. But as Mia paused to take a sip of water, her gaze wandered and found the woman in the blue dress. Lauren Bennett sat just far enough away that they could see the way she kept glancing toward the door, how her smile strained thinner with every passing minute. Mia tilted her head, studying her with the unfiltered honesty only a child could hold. "Daddy," she whispered, tugging at his sleeve. "That lady looks so." Ethan followed his daughter's eyes and his chest tightened. He recognized that expression. The battle to look fine when your world was cracking inside. He'd fought that fight himself after Sarah passed away, trying to shield a little girl from the storm that had shattered his own heart. And though Lauren was a stranger, he could see the familiar weight in her eyes. She looks really, really sad, Mia said again, her voice lower now, as if sadness were something sacred. Like you used to after Mommy went to heaven. The words landed heavy. Ethan swallowed hard, remembering those long nights of grief when he thought he couldn't hold it together for one more day. Yet here was his daughter, noticing pain in someone else, echoing the lesson he had tried so often to teach her. You always tell me we should help people, Mia continued, her brows knitting with earnest determination. You said bad days feel smaller when someone is kind. She glanced at Lauren again, then back at him. Daddy, can we help her? Ethan let out a slow breath, torn between hesitation and instinct. Around them, the cafe hummed with quiet judgment, people watching Lauren's humiliation as though it were part of the entertainment. He hated it, hated the way no one moved to soften the blow. He looked at his daughter, whose small hands still rested on his sleeve. She wasn't just asking, she was reminding him of the very thing he had drilled into her young heart. Kindness wasn't optional. It was who they were. His gaze returned to Lauren. She sat alone, her face flushed from the server's question, her dignity held by a fragile thread. For a moment, Ethan wondered what business he had, stepping into the life of a stranger dressed in a way that screamed of another world. But then Maya spoke again, softly, almost pleading. Daddy, no one should have to eat by themselves when they're sad. And with that, the decision was made. Ethan pushed back his chair, the scrape against the hardwood catching Mia's attention. He rose to his feet, steady and certain now, then reached for his daughter's hand. She gripped it tightly, her small fingers trusting, eager. Together, they turned toward the corner table where Lauren Bennett sat alone under the weight of too many stares. Ethan knew he couldn't erase the humiliation she had already endured, but maybe, just maybe, he could change how her night ended. And sometimes he thought that was enough. Ethan walked slowly, Mia's small hand tucked safely in his. Each step was a quiet decision made visible. He wasn't sure what words would come, only that letting Lauren sit alone under the weight of so many eyes felt wrong. As they reached her table, he caught the brief flicker of surprise in her expression, the way she quickly tried to hide the shimmer of tears behind practiced composure. He cleared his throat gently, keeping his tone soft, respectful. Excuse me, Titan, he began, his voice carrying just enough to reach her, but not enough to add to her embarrassment. I hope this isn't too forward, but I noticed you're dining alone, and my daughter and I were just thinking no one should have to finish an evening by themselves. For a heartbeat, Lauren only blinked, her lips parting as if the words didn't quite register. The stranger standing before her wore a simple button-down, sleeves rolled back, his hands roughened by work, but steady, kind. Beside him, a little girl studied her with wide, curious eyes that held not pity, but the innocent warmth of someone who simply wanted her to smile again. I don't want to impose, Lauren managed, her voice quiet, nearly breaking. You wouldn't be, Ethan assured. Would you like to join us? Mia's been telling me all about her new art project. I think she'd love to share it with someone new. Before Lauren could respond, Mia stepped forward, holding up a sheet of paper that had been carefully folded in her small backpack. She spread it proudly on the linen tablecloth, her excitement spilling faster than words could keep up. See, she announced, her finger pointing at a dragon with wings painted in a dozen bright shades. This is Rainbow Spark. He doesn't hurt people. He's a vegetarian. He only breathes fire to cook vegetables for the forest animals who can't reach the high branches. Lauren blinked at the drawing. Why, the creature was more cheerful than fierce, its scales a patchwork of rainbow colors, its grin crooked but endearing. And then, before she could stop herself, she laughed. Not the polite, strained kind of laugh she had been practicing all evening, but a real one, genuine, uninhibited. It startled her almost as much as it startled Ethan, who found his shoulders loosening at the sound. Rainbow Spark, she repeated, the corners of her lips lifting fully now. That's the most thoughtful dragon I've ever met. Mia's face glowed with delight. You get it. Daddy says it's creative, but I think he's just being nice because he's my dad. You really understand. Lauren placed a hand over her chest as if steadying something fragile inside. For the first time that evening, she felt the wall she had built, the armor against loneliness, against disappointment, begin to soften. Sitting across from a 7-year-old who believed dragons could cook dinner for woodland creatures, she found herself believing too. "I'd love to join you," she whispered finally, the words slipping out like a confession. Ethan gave a small nod, pulling out a chair for her without fanfare, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Lauren lowered herself into the seat, still clutching the laughter that lingered on her lips. The sting of humiliation began to fade, replaced by something she hadn't expected to find tonight: relief and a flicker of hope she couldn't name yet. As Mia leaned in, chattering about scales and colors, Lauren realized she wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time that night, she wasn't pretending. She was living, and it felt like a rescue. The tension that had wrapped itself so tightly around Lauren began to dissolve, like frost melting under morning sun. She found herself leaning forward, caught up in Mia's animated description of Rainbow Spark, the vegetarian dragon who cooked vegetables instead of scorching villages. The child's imagination filled every corner of the table, and for once, Lauren didn't feel the eyes of strangers pressing down on her. She felt included. Mia pointed at her drawing with the authority of a true storyteller. "See, he doesn't breathe fire unless the rabbits or the deer need their carrots roasted. That way, everyone in the forest eats together. Nobody gets left out." Lauren smiled, the curve of her lips soft and unguarded. "That sounds like a dragon who knows how to take care of others. Very considerate, very kind." Mia beamed, pride glowing in her eyes. "Exactly. Daddy said kindness makes the world better, so I gave Rainbow Spark the biggest heart." Lauren's gaze shifted then, just briefly, to Ethan. He sat quietly, letting his daughter shine, his work-roughened hands folded on the table. There was something steady in his presence, something that calmed the storm still lingering inside her. For a man who seemed so ordinary at first glance, he carried himself with a kind of quiet strength that reached further than words. The server returned, surprised to find the once empty table now filled with conversation and laughter. He set down fresh bread and smiled knowingly. Looks like the evening turned around. Lauren lowered her eyes, almost shy, but nodded. It did, more than I expected. The minutes slipped by without notice. Mia told stories about her classmates, about the art teacher who said dragons should only be green, and how she disagreed because the world is more fun when it's colorful. Lauren laughed so easily now, it startled her. She hadn't realized how long it had been since simple joy felt natural. She caught herself reaching across the table, tracing a finger along the rainbow-colored scales of Mia's drawing. "You're an artist. No, real artists see the world differently. And you do." Mia's mouth fell open in delight. "Daddy says that too, but it feels even more true when you say it." Ethan chuckled softly, embarrassed, but there was a glimmer of gratitude in his eyes. He watched the connection form between the two of them, and though part of him was cautious, another part felt strangely right about it. As dinner stretched on, Lauren shared small pieces of herself. Not her resume, not the curated stories she used to hide her wealth, but simpler truths. How she once loved puzzles, how she wished she could draw but never managed more than stick figures, how she sometimes ate dessert before dinner because life was too short to wait. Mia laughed so hard at that confession she nearly spilled her drink, and Ethan shook his head with mock disapproval. Great. Now she's going to demand cake before vegetables for the rest of the year. Lauren covered her mouth, but the laughter slipped free anyway. And for that moment, the sting of being stood up, the humiliation of whispered gossip, vanished. Instead, she felt the warmth of something she hadn't dared to hope for: belonging. What began as the worst evening of her recent memory was becoming a table filled with stories, shared smiles, and the flicker of possibility. And deep down, Lauren realized she wasn't just rescued from loneliness. She was being reminded of what it felt like to be seen, truly seen, without expectation. And it was beautiful. By the time the plates were cleared and the cafe began to thin out, Lauren realized hours had slipped by unnoticed. What had begun as a night she wanted to erase from memory had turned into something she wished could linger a little longer. She found herself reluctant to stand, reluctant to let go of the warmth that had replaced humiliation with laughter. Mia, still buzzing with energy, tugged at her hand as they walked toward the door. The little girl's grip was small but insistent, her eyes bright as though she'd just discovered a secret worth sharing. "You have to come to my school," she blurted, her words tumbling over each other. "Hearthlight Haven Elementary. I can show you the new dragon I drew. And my friend Tommy says dinosaurs are better, but you'll agree with me that dragons win. You just have to." Lauren blinked, caught off guard by the earnest invitation. She had been expecting a polite goodbye, maybe a quiet thank you. Instead, she was being welcomed into a child's world, the place where dreams and crayons held as much importance as meetings and deadlines. Something about that invitation reached deeper than she expected. She crouched down so she could meet Mia's eyes on level ground. "You really want me to come?" she asked gently, her voice carrying a mix of surprise and tenderness. Mia nodded fiercely, her ponytail bobbing. "Yes, you can meet Mrs. Peterson. She's the librarian, and she says books are superpowers. I think you'd like her, and you can see all my drawings." Daddy says sometimes people need someone new to look at their art because new people see things differently. You're a new person. Ethan stood a step behind, watching the exchange with a half-smile that carried both pride and something softer, quieter. He didn't interrupt. He simply let the moment belong to his daughter. Lauren felt something stir inside her chest, something she hadn't dared to feel all evening. Hope. A small, fragile kind of hope, but enough to steady her heart. "I'd love to see your school," she said softly, "and your drawings. Maybe even meet this famous Mrs. Peterson." Mia squealed, throwing her arms around Lauren's waist with the kind of affection that held no hesitation. Lauren froze for half a second, unaccustomed to the suddenness of such open love. But then her arms folded naturally around the child, and for that fleeting embrace, she felt as though she belonged somewhere she hadn't even known she was missing. When they finally stepped outside, the Portland night air was cool against her flushed cheeks. Streetlights painted golden halos on the pavement, and the sounds of the city hummed around them. Ethan turned toward her, his expression calm but thoughtful. "She doesn't invite just anyone," he said quietly. "If she asks, she means it." Lauren met his eyes, and for the first time since Marcus had vanished without a word, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen, not as the woman left behind in a cafe, not as the polished professional she tried so hard to protect, but as someone who had been gently, unexpectedly welcomed into a circle of trust. "I'll come," she promised, her voice steady now. "I wouldn't miss it." Ethan gave a small nod, the corner of his mouth curving upward, and as Mia skipped ahead, humming to herself under the glow of the street lamps, Lauren felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in far too long, the quiet beginning of something new. A hope, small but real, that maybe the worst night of her life had just opened the door to the best chapter yet. A few days later, Lauren kept her promise. The morning sky over Portland was pale and crisp as she stepped onto the grounds of Hearthlight Haven Elementary, carrying a sturdy box filled with brand new children's books. She had chosen them carefully. Stories about dragons and adventures, mysteries solved by brave kids, pages filled with color and wonder. The kind of books she wished she'd had when she was young. Inside the cafeteria, the hum of lunchtime filled the air, the clatter of trays, the chatter of children, the laughter that rose and fell in sudden bursts. Lauren hesitated for a heartbeat at the doorway, uncertain if she belonged here, her heels clicking softly against the tile. But then Mia's voice rang out like a bell, high and full of joy. She abandoned her lunch tray without a second thought and barreled toward her, arms wide. The hug that followed was fierce and unfiltered, small arms squeezing tight around Lauren's waist. Lauren bent down, startled at first, then overwhelmed by how much she had missed this kind of simple affection. It had been years since anyone had run to her just because they were happy she'd shown up. "You came? You really came?" Mia said breathlessly, her eyes shining. "Did you bring the books? Is that for our library?" Lauren laughed softly, setting the box down so the girl could peek inside. "I did. I thought your classmates might like a few more stories to read. Maybe even some with dragons that don't always look the same." Mia gasped in delight, already pulling a brightly illustrated cover halfway out of the box. "Mrs. Peterson is going to freak out. In a good way." From across the room, Ethan appeared, still in his kitchen uniform and hairnet. carrying a tray of soup for the day's lunch. His eyes caught hers, and in that moment, his smile held something quiet but certain: gratitude, surprise, maybe even admiration. "You actually came," he said as he reached them, his voice low but warm. "I wasn't sure if Mia had talked you into something you didn't really want to do." "I wanted to," Lauren replied firmly. "Besides, I promised her I'd see the new drawings, and I don't break promises to artists." They sat together at one of the long cafeteria tables, trays pushed aside to make room for Mia's notebook of dragons. It wasn't long before other children drifted over, curious about the elegant woman who listened so intently, who laughed at their stories, who asked questions as though their opinions mattered. Soon the table was crowded with small hands tugging at her sleeve, showing her doodles, asking her which colors she liked best. Lauren gave each child her full attention, leaning in as though their ideas were as important as any boardroom presentation. And to them, maybe more so. She found herself smiling until her cheeks ached, marveling at how natural it felt to be here among sticky fingers and crayons instead of crystal glasses and calculated conversations. Ethan stood nearby, leaning lightly against the edge of the table, watching the scene unfold. He could see the children's joy, the way Maya practically glowed beside Lauren. But what struck him most was the softness in Lauren's face, the ease with which she blended into this noisy, ordinary world. For the first time in years, Lauren Bennett wasn't being evaluated for her wealth or her power. She wasn't the woman in the blue dress left waiting at a restaurant table. She was simply Lauren, someone who had kept a promise, someone who had been welcomed as part of the circle. And as she laughed with Mia and her friends, Lauren felt something stir deep inside, the sense that maybe, just maybe, she belonged here, not as an outsider peeking in, but as a familiar presence, a trusted friend. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't measured by what she had. She was seen for who she was, and it was enough. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the wide classroom windows, painting long golden stripes across the floor. Crayons, colored pencils, and scraps of paper were scattered like confetti over the low tables where a group of children had gathered. Lauren sat cross-legged among them, her elegant posture softened by the chaos of art supplies and eager voices. She hesitated as a box of markers was passed her way, laughing lightly at her own uncertainty. "I should warn you," she confessed, uncapping a marker. "I can barely draw a stick figure. You might regret inviting me." Mia, already sketching a dragon with determined strokes, looked up with the matter-of-fact wisdom of a 7-year-old. "Drawing isn't about being perfect. It's about helping people try new things and not laughing when they mess up." The simplicity of the statement made Lauren pause, her heart tightening unexpectedly. Out of the mouths of children came truths she had forgotten. She smiled at Mia, humbled. "Then I suppose I'll be a student too. You'll have to show me how." Mia grinned, sliding a fresh sheet of paper toward her. "Start with a circle. Dragons always begin with circles." Soon the class filled with laughter and chatter. Lauren found herself leaning close to a boy frustrated with his attempt at scales, gently suggesting he try mixing colors instead of erasing. She watched his face brighten when the experiment worked, and it filled her with a sense of usefulness that no boardroom could match. Another child asked if she liked cats, and before long, Lauren was helping sketch a clumsy but cheerful kitten wearing a crown. The children's faith in her encouragement was startling, almost overwhelming. From the back of the room, Ethan watched. He had stayed quiet, his arms folded loosely as he leaned against the doorframe. At first, he expected Lauren to hold herself apart, too polished for the mess of crayons and glue sticks. But she didn't. She knelt on the floor, smudged a bit of green marker on her hand, and laughed along with the children when her dragon came out looking more like a lopsided turtle. She didn't correct them, didn't dismiss their wild ideas. She joined them fully. He saw Mia glow under her attention, the way his daughter's shoulders straightened when Lauren praised her drawing, and he felt something stir inside himself. Something that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with longing. This woman, he thought, was exactly the kind of presence he wanted in Mia's life. Not because of the books she donated or the elegance she carried, but because of how she listened, how she made every child believe their imagination mattered. Ethan had spent years telling himself to protect his heart, to keep life simple for Mia's sake. Yet watching Lauren laugh with his daughter, hearing the easy music of their voices together, he knew simplicity had already been rewritten. At one point, Lauren lifted her paper, revealing her uneven dragon with a triumphant smile. "He might not be perfect," she said, holding it high, "but I think he has character." The room erupted in cheers and giggles, Mia clapping the loudest. "See, Daddy, she gets it." Ethan couldn't help but laugh quietly, though his chest felt tight. In the golden light of that ordinary classroom, surrounded by crayons and laughter, he realized a truth he hadn't dared to admit until now. Lauren Bennett wasn't just passing through. She was becoming part of the picture, part of Mia's world, and maybe, if he let himself hope, part of his own. It happened on an ordinary morning, reassuring, the kind Ethan thought would pass like any other. He had stopped at the corner store on his way to work, the smell of fresh coffee drifting through the narrow aisles. He reached for the paper, more out of habit than interest, but when his eyes landed on the front page, the air seemed to leave his lungs. There she was, Lauren Bennett. Her photograph was crisp and polished, her smile the confident kind reserved for business magazines. The headline shouted her name alongside words that felt worlds away from the woman he had come to know. CEO of Bennett Enterprises announces major educational initiative. The article described her as one of the youngest billionaire executives in the country, celebrated for her innovative strategies and her vast fortune. Ethan stood frozen, the newspaper trembling slightly in his hands. Images of her kneeling on the classroom floor with crayons, laughing with Mia, smudging green marker across her hand. Those moments clashed violently with the woman in print, the one whose net worth was counted in billions. He felt a knot tighten in his chest. She hadn't told him, not once, and all the while he had let her into his daughter's world. When Lauren arrived at the school later that afternoon, carrying her usual warmth, she found Ethan waiting by the playground, the folded newspaper in his hand. The look on his face stopped her in her tracks. "We need to talk," he said, his tone steady but edged with hurt. They walked together to the quiet swings at the far end of the lot, the laughter of children drifting faintly from a distance. Ethan opened the paper, holding it up as if to confirm what words could not. "Lauren Bennett," he said, her name sounding foreign on his lips. "CEO, billionaire, one of the most powerful women in the country. That's who you are." Lauren's breath caught. She had dreaded this moment, had known it would come eventually, yet still it pierced like a blade. "Yes," she admitted softly. "That's who I am, but it's not all of me." Ethan shook his head, sinking onto the bench, his voice raw. "When you said you worked with numbers and helped companies make decisions, you left out a few details, don't you think? Do you know how this feels? I'm a school cook. I saved for weeks just to bring Mia to dinner. And you?" He broke off, unable to finish. Lauren sat beside him, her hands trembling slightly. "I didn't tell you because I wanted, for once, to be seen as just me, not a title, not a bank account. Do you know what it's like, Ethan? To never be sure if people care about you or what you can give them?" Her voice cracked, the words spilling faster now. "With you and Mia, I got to be Lauren, just a woman who laughs at silly dragon drawings and eats soup in a school cafeteria. That's the truest version of me I've been in years." He turned toward her then, his expression conflicted. Anger still simmered, but beneath it was something softer, recognition. He thought of Mia's laughter when Lauren praised her art, the way she knelt with the children as if she belonged there, the way her eyes softened whenever she looked at him. That hadn't been a performance. Silence stretched between them, heavy yet fragile. Finally, Ethan exhaled, his voice quieter. "So which one are you? Lauren, the CEO in the paper, or the woman who sat on the floor with my daughter?" "Both," she whispered. "But the woman who loves spending time with you, who thinks Mia is the brightest star she's ever met. That's the one I want to be. That's the one that feels real." Ethan studied her face, searching for any trace of pretense, and slowly he found none. Only truth, only fear, only the kind of honesty that came when everything else had been stripped away. He let out a long breath, his shoulders easing, though the hurt had not fully vanished. Then no more secrets. If you're going to be part of our lives, I need the real you. Lauren nodded, her eyes glistening. Deal. No more masks, just me. If you'll still have me. And though uncertainty lingered, Ethan felt the first flicker of trust return, because in her trembling voice, he heard not a billionaire's confession, but a woman's plea to be loved for who she truly was. The playground was quiet now, the echo of children's laughter fading into the late afternoon air. Ethan sat with the newspaper folded tightly in his hands, but his gaze had softened, no longer fixed on the headlines. Lauren sat beside him, the silence stretching between them, heavy but not unbearable. She drew in a shaky breath, steadying herself. I don't want to walk away from you, she said, her voice low but certain. From either of you. Ethan, I want to stay in your lives. I wanted to keep eating soup in the cafeteria, listening to Mia talk about dragons, laughing at things that don't make sense to anyone but us. That's what feels real to me. She paused, her hands twisting in her lap. Yes, I have resources. Yes, I can help. But I don't want you to think I'm trying to buy your affection. I've seen how much good you can do with so little. Imagine what could happen if you had more to work with. Her eyes lifted to his, shimmering with both fear and hope. I don't want to be someone swooping in to fix things. I want to build with you, to be part of something that's ours. Ethan studied her face, searching for the truth in her words. And he saw it, plain, raw, unguarded. The same woman who had knelt in a classroom full of crayons, who had made his daughter feel like her art mattered, was the one speaking now. Slowly he reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers closing around hers, the contrast almost startling. No more secrets, he said firmly. If this is going to work, I need to know the whole of you, not just the parts you think I can handle. Lauren swallowed, her lips trembling into the smallest of smiles. Deal. No more masks. You'll get all of me, the CEO, the woman, the one who cries too easily at children's drawings. All of it. For a long moment they sat hand in hand, the air thick with unspoken understanding. Ethan's thumb brushed lightly against her skin, a gesture so simple yet filled with meaning. I don't know how this will look, he admitted softly. I've never imagined myself in your world, and I can't picture you in mine, but I can't deny what's happening. Not with Mia, not with me. Lauren leaned closer, her eyes never leaving his. Then we don't have to picture it yet. We just have to live it day by day, choice by choice. Her words sank deep, wrapping around the ache in his chest like a balm. For the first time since opening that newspaper, Ethan felt the weight of betrayal begin to lift. What remained was fragile but real. Trust, growing again like green shoots after winter. He squeezed her hand, and this time she squeezed back with certainty. They weren't promising perfection. They weren't pretending differences didn't exist. They were promising to try together. Ethan glanced toward the swings where only shadows remained. Mia's going to ask questions, he murmured. She deserves answers. Then we'll give them, Lauren replied, her voice steady now, together. And there, beneath the fading light, they let the silence fall again. Not the silence of fear, but of two hearts quietly admitting what neither had dared to say out loud, that something deeper was taking root between them. Something fragile, something strong, something that felt very much like love. Spring returned to Portland with colors brighter than memory, and Hearthlight Haven Elementary seemed to bloom along with it. Where once the library shelves had stood half empty, now they overflowed with new books, tales of dragons, mysteries, and adventures waiting to be discovered. The playground had transformed too. Swings creaked with joy, children raced across new slides and climbing walls, and the art program that had once been cut from the budget now thrived, brushes and paints breathing life into young imaginations. On the day of the spring festival, laughter carried across the schoolyard like music. Booths lined the edges, filled with games and treats, and the scent of fresh popcorn floated on the breeze. At the far wall of the school, a massive mural stretched wide, every inch painted by the children themselves. Rainbows, dragons, animals, and dreams splashed in every color imaginable. Lauren stood back, her heart swelling as she admired it, knowing her hands had played only a small part compared to the joy of the children who created it. Then she heard it. Mia's voice rang out, clear as a bell. She ran toward her, hair flying, a cluster of classmates following close behind. Come see the mural. It's got about a rainbow spark and or at the library with books that reach all the way to the sky. Lauren laughed, allowing herself to be pulled forward, surrounded by eager little hands pointing out their contributions. For a moment, she forgot the weight of titles, the press of responsibility. She was simply Lauren, someone who belonged here, someone these children trusted and adored. When she turned, Ethan was waiting near the ring toss booth, a simple smile playing on his lips. He crossed the yard toward her, his presence steady, grounding. And then, before she could piece together why his eyes looked brighter, why his steps carried quiet determination, he stopped in front of her. The world seemed to hush, the sounds of the festival softening as Ethan dropped to one knee. A small box rested in his calloused hand, its velvet worn but its meaning shining clear. Mia stood just beside him, her small hands clutching a second ring, a backup just in case. Her excitement was impossible to contain, her little feet bouncing against the grass. Lauren Bennett, Ethan began, his voice strong but tender. A year ago, you turned the worst night of my life into the beginning of something I didn't even know I needed. You let me rescue you, and in return, you rescued me. You rescued Mia. You gave us back laughter. You gave us hope. He paused, the emotion rising in his throat. Today, I want to rescue all of us from ever being lonely again. Will you marry me? Lauren's hand flew to her mouth, tears welling before she could stop them. The woman who had once sat alone in a cafe, humiliated and broken, now stood surrounded by children's laughter, by love, by family. The word escaped her lips through tears. Yes, absolutely yes. Mia squealed with joy, leaping into their arms. Group hug! Now we're really a family, she shouted, her voice carrying across the yard. The crowd of children cheered, parents clapped, and for a moment, the entire festival seemed to spin around their embrace. Lauren bent her forehead against Ethan's, her tears mingling with laughter. And in that instant, she understood what she had been searching for all along. Happiness had never been in the wealth she guarded or the power she wielded. It was here, in the arms of a man who cooked for children, in the love of a little girl who believed dragons could feed the world, in the life they were now promising to build together. Sometimes the greatest gifts don't arrive with grand entrances or perfect timing. Sometimes the best things begin on nights that feel broken. And sometimes the happiness you never dared to imagine finds you exactly when you need it most. In the warm glow of the kindling cafe, Lauren Bennett sat alone, her heart heavy with the sting of abandonment, her blue dress a silent witness to a night that shattered her composure. Yet, from a nearby table, Ethan Walker, a single dad, and his daughter Mia, with her vibrant dragon drawings, saw not a billionaire CEO, but a woman drowning in loneliness. Their simple act of kindness, inviting her to their table, sharing stories of vegetarian dragons, transformed a moment of humiliation into one of connection. Ethan's quiet strength and Mia's unfiltered warmth reminded Lauren that she was more than her wealth or title. She was human, deserving of love, not pity. This story unveils a profound lesson. True kindness, offered without expectation, can heal the deepest wounds. In a world where status often overshadows sincerity, Ethan and Mia teach us that a small gesture, a shared meal, a child's drawing, can rebuild someone's sense of worth. Lauren's journey from isolation to belonging shows that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the doorway to authentic relationships. We all carry hidden scars, but it's in reaching out, in seeing and being seen, that we find hope. The courage to step into someone's pain, as Ethan did, or to accept help, as Lauren did, weaves bonds stronger than any empire. This tale that urges us to look beyond appearances, to offer compassion where judgment lingers, and to trust that even our darkest nights can birth new beginnings. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts below. Have you ever found hope in an unexpected act of kindness? Tell us where you're watching from and if you believe in the power of second chances. For more stories of love, courage, and connection, hit subscribe now. Your support keeps these heartfelt moments alive, one story at a time.